He's Tom Pelissero, NFL Network insider. You can see him on the Insiders on NFL Network tonight at 7 Eastern. All right, Tom, before we get started, you can start your team with Aaron Rodgers or Peyton Manning. They're both 27 years of age. Who you taking as your quarterback?
So Peyton Manning won his first MVP, I believe, at age 27 in '03. So he was very much like coming into his prime at that point. I was covering the Packers in the early stages of Aaron Rodgers' career. I was at the Green Bay Press Gazette from '07 to '09, so he was a little bit below age 27. He was coming into his MVP years there too. I think it's probably Peyton, honestly, just because the track record was there. You know, Aaron had gone the JUCO route and then had played at Cal, and they totally remade his mechanics early on. You were still finding out. Now, you know, '09, 10, 11, he suddenly was playing at, the best level in the NFL. But just in terms of like the safety, who I feel most confident about, I'd probably say Peyton Manning.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a wrong answer. Aaron, I think, was 28 when he won his MVP. Peyton, because I mentioned this, I wonder if there's going to be a bias with Lamar Jackson because he hasn't won a Super Bowl. And it feels like we sometimes base our regular season vote on or against somebody because they haven't done well in the postseason. We do this in the NBA. You know, Joel Embiid hadn't won anything, but he somehow got an MVP. Joker, they held it against him. You can't give him another MVP. Giannis got an MVP after he won a title there. So I wonder, Lamar probably with a bias against him, and then you got what's happening with Derrick Henry as well.
Yeah, well, I think that's the more compelling point, Dan, is Derrick Henry. If you've got two people on the same team and you can make a cogent argument for either of them being the MVP, then is either of them the MVP or is it kind of the perfect collective? I don't think that now everybody does it differently. I had a vote for a number of years, and then they don't let you vote when you go to NFL Network, so I lost my vote. My procedure was I just talked to every coach and GM in the league that I could and said, like, who would you vote for on all these awards? I think other people probably just vote on gut feeling or what they're seeing on the field. I know this, Aaron Rodgers won 4 MVPs, and he's got 1 Super Bowl win. Lamar's won 2 MVPs without a Super Bowl win. I think that we like the new thing. I think that's the biggest bias that we see is, hey, Cam Newton had an unbelievable year, and he did in 2015. But at no point before or after that was he an MVP level type of a player. He won in a landslide in 2015 because, it just gets boring voting for Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. Bill Belichick, I think, only won like 1 or 2 Coach of the Year awards because people get bored. They like the new thing, and then half the time the Coach of the Year, 2 years later, they're fired.
Yeah, but Jared Goff, you can't play any better than he's played. In the last 6 games, these are historical numbers, and they're winning. There's efficiency. They appear to be the best team in the NFC. But it doesn't feel like Jared Goff gets mentioned when – and look, I'm not campaigning for him. I just know what he's doing hasn't been done before. So the value you get for him with your team has to be factored in as well.
Jared Goff's had a really weird career, Dan, when you think about it. I mean, he's the #1 overall pick in 2016. He plays his first year, takes over under Jeff Fisher, and it's just abysmal. And everyone in the world is saying the Rams messed up. They should have drafted Carson Wentz. This guy can't play. Sean McVay gets there the following year. Jared Goff starts playing all of a sudden at a really high level, and there was a lot made of, the communication and how McVay was in Goff's ear and helping him through. But Jared was learning all the way through there. They go to a Super Bowl. They get shut down by the Patriots. A year or 2 later, McVay decides, I can't win with the guy. He's the throw-in. They had to trade a first-round pick to offload his guaranteed money to get Matthew Stafford. And obviously, it worked out well for the Rams because, they won a Super Bowl in that first year with Stafford. But for Goff to go from he's a joke to, oh, my goodness, he's one of the best players in the league to he's a joke again, back to he's one of the best players in the league. Like, you don't see that type of arc a whole lot here. I think that yeah, I mean, I think that some of that does perhaps get held against people. Everybody knows Ben Johnson's really good. Dan Campbell's really good. They got tons of weapons on that Lions team, but they're still, going out there. They lose Aiden Hutchinson, one of the best young defensive players in the league. And it doesn't even matter because they're scoring 50 points a game. I think that Jared Goff has to be considered among the MVP candidates, even though, if you put together the Jared Goff highlight reel versus the Lamar or
True.
Patrick Mahomes highlight reel, Goff loses.
Tom Pelissero, NFL Network insider. Give me the best trade rumor you heard yesterday that didn't come to fruition, or the last week or so.
I would say, I mean, there's always, various names that pop up at different points. And there was a lot made of, the Rams stuff, which was real. I mean, the Cooper Kupp stuff, they absolutely explored it. He didn't end up getting traded. All of a sudden, they win 3 games in a row, and they're like a half game back in the division lead now. If that season goes a different direction, are we talking about Matthew Stafford potentially being traded? I mean, there were definitely people speculating about that when they were 1-4, but we never had a quarterback suffer a major season-ending injury. That's one of the biggest differences last year versus this year. You had that early spate last year of Aaron Rodgers gets hurt right out of the gate, and Cousins gets hurt, and Anthony Richardson gets hurt. Like there was this line of quarterbacks suffering major injuries. We didn't have it. So a lot of the quarterback stuff never really got ramped up just because there wasn't the need there. I would say, one of the wildest trades that happened was what happened with Marshawn Lattimore, because the Saints go from firing Dennis Allen on Sunday, or Monday morning, whatever it was, a very unique statement, I think it's fair to say, from Mickey Loomis, where he basically says, like, this wasn't Dennis Allen's fault. He's a great coach. We had a ton of injuries, and we're going to miss him. I don't recall seeing a GM say something. There was no turn in the statement to, but we needed to make a change. So Mickey Loomis feels like still he's got a really good team. The one guy they were going to trade was Lattimore, and credit to Mickey for stirring up a market. They had 4 different teams. I thought it was getting done to the Chiefs that they were going to make yet another splash.
Oh, wow.
The Ravens were in that mix. The Chargers were, I believe, in that mix. And then in the end, it's the Commanders, who a year ago were the big story at trade deadline because they traded everybody, because they traded Chase Young to San Francisco and they traded Montez Sweat to Chicago to get a year later, and for them to be the team that really came out of nowhere in the last hour before that trade got done to give up a 3rd and 4th round pick to add a veteran cornerback. It's a fun time to watch what the Commanders are doing. But that was definitely one where you're chasing all these different permutations. And I did not think until the final 20 minutes or so that he was going to Washington.
Who should have been traded?
It's a good question. I'm a little bit surprised that the Browns didn't do more. I think that that's probably indicative of the fact that they feel like they had a playoff team last year, but for the up and down quarterback play that they've had throughout the course of the season, and now with Deshaun Watson hurt yet again, another guy who got hurt last year, another one of those ones where they went through 5 different quarterbacks. They feel like they still could have been good. I mean, it sounded like they were willing to trade just about anybody. I wasn't surprised that they didn't trade Myles Garrett, but I thought, listen, they already traded Amari Cooper, and that was a fairly significant deal. They traded Zadarius Smith to Detroit finally yesterday after several weeks of work. But, between, let's say, Greg Newsome, I'm just throwing out names that I thought like made sense on paper. Greg Newsome, maybe David Njoku. You've got some good players, Elijah Moore, that you probably could get value for. I thought maybe this would be especially knowing the Browns' analytical approach, I thought maybe this would be more of a go down to build back up. They seem to be, looking toward 2025 of let's get a new quarterback potentially. See where Deshaun Watson is. Realistically, they got to draft a quarterback next year, and they did pick up some ammunition. I thought maybe they'd pick up even more.
Yeah, I don't know if you can rebuild with Deshaun Watson's contract there.
It's a really valid point, Dan. I would say this, $92 million is what they still owe over the next 2 years. Forget this year for a second because they already paid that down anyway. They owe $92 million over the next 2 years. That would be the most cash that we've ever seen a team eat. But we just saw the Broncos last year eat, it was somewhere around $40 million of Russell Wilson just to say we are moving on. How do the Browns get out of things with Deshaun Watson? I mean, there's several different ways this could go. One is you just say, we're paying him anyway. Let's draft a quarterback, sign a quarterback, whatever. Let Deshaun come in. It's an open competition, and we see what happens. And we either cut him, or he's the backup, or maybe he finally gets back and is the starter again. But we let it ride. The second option of this is you pull off a Brock Osweiler style trade where you send assets with the player to get rid of the player and get rid of his money. 92 million would be an extreme amount to trade. I mean, Brock Osweiler, that's always the example because the Browns at the time took on his $17 million salary and got a second round pick out of it. Well, if a second round pick's worth 17 million, well, what do you get for 92 million? I mean, you're probably throwing good money after bad, literally and figuratively. If you're saying, all right, let's send 2 first-round picks just to try to get rid of Deshaun's money. So the third option is you cut him. You just say, we're going to eat the 92 million. It is what it is. We're going to take it now, and Deshaun can go on to the next thing, and we are getting a clean break. That would hurt, obviously, because they put so much into this, trading several first-round picks, giving them a $230 million fully guaranteed contract, taking all the flack that they did, and a lot of it justified for making that trade at the time that they did it. But they thought they were getting a top 5 quarterback. Instead, they got a guy who on paper is the least efficient quarterback in the entire NFL, is hurt once again, and has played a grand total of, I want to say it's 19 games over the past 4 seasons combined. That's where they are. I think you can rebuild, but it's going to take a little bit of, it's going to take some pain. We've seen teams do it. The Bills did it early on when Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane were there. Just took the boatload of the cap consequences and everything else. They had a really down second year, but then, you got that thing building in the right direction. It's not impossible. It'll hurt. There's going to be pain, but it's not impossible, Dan.
Great to talk to you. Thank you again, Tom.
Appreciate it, as always.